it's funny because the last 2 years we've had digital connections. I've been a delegate, and the feedback we had was it's fantastic, but you didn't tell us very much about yourselves. What can we learn about Compete? So I've been a delegate 2 years in a row, and I've ended up liking it so much I joined the company. So maybe you guys, if any of you are interested, just staple your CV to the back of your business card in that thing outside there, and you might be up here next year. We are looking at one category as an example. It's a kind of gentle segue into Compete data and what it can do. One category in confectionery, which may not be relevant to all of you, but it's a really good example of something which has got some really quite pronounced weak performance areas. I think it's really good opportunities. And so it's a great example of how we can use online behavioral data to identify and correct those underperformances. And it's all taken from this report, which, as Stephen said, is in your pack. Right, so let's got a couple of questions. Which retailer do you think is best at encouraging impulse purchases online? Ocado, great. Quite a lot of love for that. Good stuff. Right. Have we got another question? No, we don't. Right. Okay. So look, this is our first bit of data. On the right-hand side, you'll see this is the universe of confectionery shoppers. 12% of the 7 million average monthly grocery website shoppers are also visiting confectionery-related pages. And if we compare that with some TGI data, which I happen to know some people at TGI, 91% is the penetration figure offline. So one way of looking at it is there's a massive opportunity here, given that actually of those 12%, only about half of those visitors to confectionery pages go on to make a purchase. But some people say, and people will argue, that maybe impulse just isn't suited to online. There isn't the immediacy. But then there are things in immediacy. If you look at someone like Net-a-Porter or Aurora, delivering 90-minute lead time. So immediacy, we shouldn't just rule that out as it's never going to happen. I would argue that this is an underdeveloped category online, and we may end up calling it something different, but it's no less important for that. So obviously, when online started, it was led by larger, more affluent households, and it followed, therefore, that it was staples, bulky items, and so on that was first in the basket and were the early winners. But now there are many forces in play. All the green boxes on the left-hand side are feeding in to initiatives designed either to reduce delivery costs or to increase loyalty to the retailer. These have been introduced, and that these are driving the frequency of shopping, which in turn is changing the way the mission type mix. So you get a lot fewer major shops, a lot more of those top-up shops, even occasion-based missions, and that in turn is shifting the focus away from purely staples towards more impulse categories. I shouldn't say necessarily impulse categories, but categories such as confectionery. And alongside the growing online shopping penetration, that's obviously going to increase sales. So many reasons there why we think that this is set to change pretty quickly. And so retailers have presented a number of levers to category managers. These are 4 of them, pretty retail-centric, you might say, a bit of a transition from their offline model onto online, and designed, yes, obviously, partly around the category shopper, but there are also ways in which retailers use these to build or feed into their wider strategies, and they can be used just generally to increase the revenue from their suppliers and maximize the promotional spend. And so with the presence of other motives other than pure category ones, it makes, when presented with an opportunity to invest in, say, favorites, it makes it really difficult to understand and get a real handle on what the real return of investment might be for that up front, comparing with other retailers, other functions. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And what it does mean is that when some people come across one measure they find to be quite accurate, quite reliable, within one category, one retailer, that becomes a bit of a life raft, and it becomes a bit of a lever, and there's a temptation to keep yanking the same thing over and over again, taking it into other categories, using it with other retailers, and that's, in my view, pretty dangerous. So, for example, everybody here in the room, I'm sure, in this space will have really good online sales data, but they probably lack visibility and will be grappling quite hard to address these other points with the other missing metrics which things like clickstream data can reveal. So, look, we've established that there's some really big headroom in confectionery market. There's maybe limited data, or some of the data you're not so sure of whether you want to trust it. So we're going to use a bit of clickstream data to deconstruct that path to purchase. Our first slide up with our data is looking at the share of these three grocers of the online confectionery purchases. Now, no surprise probably to FMCG people in the room that Tesco dominates, 64%, and that's over-indexing versus its share of total grocery, about at 13% more than its share of total grocery. Asda quite a long way behind with 26%, under-indexing, so performing less well in confectionery as against its total, and Sainsbury's even further again behind, 12% share only, and that's 73%, 73 index, showing it's quite some way behind its overall market performance. And that is something which I think anyone working with Sainsbury's needs to be looking to address. The conversion funnel on Sainsbury's is not good. If you also compare the conversion rate, one retailer with another, with an index such as this, it really brings out and highlights the difference between Tesco and Sainsbury's here, and the variance between 107 and 79, 28%. So if you consider for a minute that if you are considering any investment in building traffic to either of these sites with a view to conversion, for any given measure, you're looking at a 28% deficit, 28% fewer sales on Sainsbury's versus Tesco. So that needs a considerable amount of thought, and Sainsbury's needs to address that with its customers. So I alluded to this earlier, these levers, right? Which one would you be most likely to invest in? Think of yourself as a confectionery company. Which of these levers are you going to start pulling if you had a choice and none of our data? So back to the answers. I think it was special offers, wasn't it? Yeah, special offers, a leading one, 43%. That's interesting. I'll come back to that in a minute, I think. So the next thing is to have a look at what the relative role these these three things, special offers pages, favorites, and internal search have overall. So a lot of people tell us actually that favorites are really important, and favorites clearly have a very strong multiplier effect. So for every time you're getting added to a favorites list, you can expect a multiple of repeat purchases following, so there's a great value attached to that. And a lot of people also say that search can be, I don't know, 30% of contribution, but these are quite generic, and every category is very different. And so this is an opportunity. We've taken a look here at confectionery, and the picture maybe changes a little bit. And okay, people picked out special offers as important, but I think as an aside, just examine what it means to be favorited, and what shoppers are using favorites for, and what impulse shoppers might not be using favorites for. So it's slightly underused a bit here, I think. And in my opinion, there's a little bit of a difference between adding something to favorites as an essential, something you want to see every week in your basket, and wondering if that's a little bit blunt. Is there not any other way of creating another kind of parallel list, another facility for a shopper to express their repertoire, and so have served relevant things to them? So it's kind of, you know, do I like loo roll? Not really, but it's in my basket. It's a favorite. Do I like Mars bars? Yes, maybe I do. and I'd like to see those a bit more often at the right moment and delivered to me in the right way. So back to the data, the favorites are quite important for Tesco, quite important for Sainsbury, but you couldn't take an opinion based on that data point and say, we're going to do something with Asda, because that's really different, and internal search is much more important for Asda. So, okay, the obvious thing, offers. They're really important here in Tesco in particular. But if we're trying to increase, we saw those things of increasing frequency, if online is going to be more important for confectionery going forward, do they want to really push the volume button on this and push through volume? I don't know whether that's the right way. Is there a risk of that becoming or exacerbating the commoditization of the product online? And is there really no opportunity to grow a more emotionally engaging experience for users, for shoppers online? And the truth is that the names that retailers use for these functions is pretty much the same. But the shopper experience, the shopper profile, the interaction with them varies massively. So again, I'm saying, I don't think you should use a single retailer and take any learnings sideways, look at a learning from a category, taking it to another category. Not a good idea. And I think you'll see some differences as well in search. Just as an example, just comparing two retailers, Asda in this case with Sainsbury's. And search is really high unbranded on Asda. And that's quite interesting. And we might see the difference between branded and own label in a bit. But at Sainsbury's, it's much less. And so this combination of shopper profile, the way the function works, the way that function interacts with the other function on that particular retailer makes a massive difference to people's selection of different tools. And we can go to a further level. And so what I'm going to do here is compare two baskets. So on the left-hand side, the average basket accounts for about 80% of confectionery shoppers and is a slightly more frequent shop with the easier number of steps, 15 steps or so. On the right-hand side, 20% of shoppers with a much greater level of steps, but a less frequent monthly session. Now, this is a bit more visual than I don't expect you to read through all this data. It's a bit heavy. But the point is to try and get a view of how different the shopper path can be when you look at different basket sizes. So just on the left, basically what I'm saying here is that confectionery is appearing after either internal search or food, both quite equal, and having some visits to other product pages, and it appears later on in the basket, so it can either be in the middle or at the end of the shopper journey there. And on the larger basket, you're seeing a little bit more emphasis on favorites. So obviously, a more complex journey needs some more tools to help you navigate through that and remain sane. So favorites works really well there, and special offers coming in as well. Probably to, near at the end and reducing the absolute value of the basket. So if we think about how we've seen a bit, how it works in the moment. And in my view, I think one of the problems anyway, is that the tools available are rather blunt and not really having the impact desired, or it's not going to work as confectionery keeps changing. And because offline, the experience is very different, right? You've got extensive, simultaneous choice at the count line. This is a bit old, actually. I can see the prices there. It's like 27p for a I don't know, Twix. That sounds a bit old, but this hasn't changed much, right? It's pretty much the same. But online is very different. And so where is this? This is an emotional, it's a visual, it's a very wide assortment of competing items. And then flick into online. Who's delivering this online? Not really sure. It's a kind of, you're comparing that emotional engagement thing with this. It's a bit of a kind of Mars colliding with Venus. And it really guarantees a radically different experience depending on which site you're on. So here's the question. If you're investing so much on digital touch points outside the grocer, is all of that investment getting lost at the portal once you go inside the grocery store? Well, I'm going to pick on Sainsbury's first. I've navigated through to chocolate, singles, and it's offered me a couple of Aero bars, fine, not too bad. Some children's chocolate, not really, that's not what I was looking for. And an old school favorite of mine, actually, sherbet fountains, dib dabs, great stuff, but it's not really chocolate, is it? So, I'm a bit worked up now, my blood sugar level is dropping fast, and I move on to Asda, and I see some other issues. I'm getting a bit of taxonomy problems and some maintenance issues. We've got a lonely Kinder Bueno bar, and 3 ice creams, really? 3 out of the 4 things I'm offered first are not even in category. And then the second row, I'm getting 3 for £1, but I've no idea what it is. There's no picture there. It's really not good. So I'm getting really, really worked up now, and I'm thinking, Tesco, that's going to rescue me, right? Tesco is great. No, disaster, it's even worse. Absolutely awful. They've got not even a recognizable brand in the top 2 things it's offering me. They're giving me their venture brand, the Choco-Block, in first and second position, and I'm really fed up, and I'm not going anywhere near that. And might end up feeling like Liu Shang here at the Olympics, eating the hurdles in front of me in frustration. So really, quite seriously, how am I going to improve the return on investment? Which levers are there for me to pull? The opportunity is really huge. There's surely a change afoot which is going to make confectionery more important online, and there are things I can do to make sure my brand, my products are getting up there. Performance is varying. Evolution of sites is rapid, and the paths are very different by retailer, by category, by basket size, and so on. So what do I do? I think probably in line with the apocryphal advice to the traveller to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. So how do I reconcile that rather unhelpful guidance? Well, I think it's a question of getting a really good idea about the online consumer journey before you start working out what you're going to do online. Maybe you've got to, if not throw away your assumptions about offline, it's a whole different model online, maybe not in a good way either, but you've certainly got to neutralize your assumptions and go into it with an open mind. We're saying, our suggestion is crow, right, but work backwards, right? Start from the basket. You can identify those brave souls that really manage to jump through all those hoops and get to the basket. And using data such as ours, you can layer out some of those perhaps who are have less affinity with special offers, or who reach there through a certain route, and really work out which levers to pull to drive those. And using this kind of data, you can make much better cases to retailers to say, hey, come on, this isn't working for us. We've got to find a way of attracting these kinds of consumers, driving the quality of visitor, and getting conversion rates up, and particularly someone like Sainsbury's. So it's a long road. Asda have already reworked their website. Sainsbury's are piloting a new one, so maybe their figures are going to bounce up soon. Ocado, I think rightly you picked that was pretty good. That's a much nicer experience on Ocado for this category. You can scroll through a lot more products at once, but it doesn't have that decent scale, right? So is Ocado going to get some good scale anytime soon? And what about Morrison's? Will we see them in January, and will they make a splash in the market? So Jeremy's mentioned this a little bit earlier on. It's not about best practice. You can't really do a massive project and really nail it and say, I know what's going on. You've got to keep following it. You've got to keep monitoring it, work out what's going to happen, optimize a strategy for each retail account, make sure you know that the categories are behaving differently, and understand that and how to leverage it. Wouldn't it be nice to know that your campaign was the one that was 30% more than your competitor, or that you weren't being beaten in any part of the funnel by one of the opposition, and that you weren't being sold a dodgy investment by one of your retail customers? So optimize, test, and adapt. Keep monitoring it. I know a good data source and a really great team that can help you do that. So come and speak to me afterwards if you're interested. Thank you very much.